All right, so let's get going. So this is the course called The Plant Kingdom. This is a course that has a lot of different angles to approach plants from. The topic, the title, The Plant Kingdom, is meant, I think, to evoke this idea of basically all of plants. So clearly we can't cover all of plants in one semester, but I hope to give you a feel for lots of different aspects of studying plants, whether you're approaching this from an interest in plants or kind of a casual familiarity with plants. Maybe you find yourself more as an ecology person. So we'll get lots of interesting topics related to plants, and hopefully you'll come out from this class knowing a lot more about how plants work, where they are in the world, what they do, why they're important, and so on. So I'd like to start with this slide. This slide just illustrates kind of the importance of plants. So this is a habitat in a tropical location. You can kind of figure that out based on just the lushness of the greenery here. Not too different, I guess, from the amount of green you would find in some Wisconsin habitats during the summer, of course. So we're in a temperate locality where things are not always green. But during the peak of the growing season, things are pretty darn green around here. And the greenness there, obviously, you not knowing much about plants, or if you don't know much about plants, you at least probably could recognize them as green, leafy things that are growing in place and typically not moving around a whole lot. And we see lots of diversity here. We see maybe some hints as far as what kind of habitat we're in. I see certain kinds of plants that remind me of more tropical localities, so more a little bit in the way of palms and a lot of mosses on here. So if you're looking at a habitat and you see the green of the plants, or the plants themselves at least, they're always going to be there. Plants are all over the place. If you're looking at this from ecology, plants are primary producers. They serve as the food for the other levels of, other trophic levels of the community. And so they're always there, easy to find, and very important from a nutrition energy standpoint. All right, so not only from a narrow location perspective, but also you can zoom out, see plants from space. I defy you to really see any animals on this image or evidence of animals. You don't even see really evidence of people so much at this scale, but we certainly can see the evidence of the plants. This greenery all throughout the globe shows us that the plants are really important. They're all over the place, and so important that they're providing food and gas exchange for all kinds of communities around the world. If you look at this map, you can see that the plants are distributed in places that are green, and the only places really where plants are absent, kind of take a guess real quick where you're not seeing the green color. And it's down toward the poles where there's ice. So a little too cold for plants in those areas. And then a few places we've got some desert habitats. So Sahara Desert, Arabian Peninsula, Namib Desert, a lot of Australia is dry desert, Gobi Desert and so on, Southwest North America, west coast of South America. These are desert areas. And really the only places in the world that are not rich in plants are these areas that plants can't grow well in. There would be plants there, they're just not as lush and dense. And then I guess I should say in Antarctica, not so much in the way of plants, nor in the Arctic. But even in deserts, we do have some plants, just not very lush. And you can see a video of the importance of plants here. This is basically photosynthesis, or this greenness that we can see from space changing over time. So there's a little bit of green in the oceans. There are phytoplankton organisms that are doing photosynthesis in the oceans, and then green on the terrestrial environments as well. So right now you see some change. This little band of color is moving up and down. So moving north and then south. And as it heads south right here, what's happening? Well, it's not exactly, this is days at a time, so it's not the end of a day, it's really the end of a season as we're changing. So the north gets dark as the north gets cold, and photosynthesis becomes harder for plants to do during that time of year. And so we have these areas closer to the North Pole, closer to the South Pole that are our temperate habitats, and you can see the plants kind of going away as the winter wears on in those latitudes, whereas in the more equatorial, the tropical latitudes, that green is usually about always there. Changes maybe in a specific location. There can be wet seasons, dry seasons that affect plants' ability to grow in an area. Some people talk about this as the earth breathing, right? So plants are doing photosynthesis, they're providing food, as we'll see. They're also providing oxygen. So this is where oxygen is coming from. They're taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And that's also going to become important, as we'll see. So zooming in a little bit more closely, you can see this evidence of green. In this case, I want to highlight just the green in the water bodies. So this is Michigan, mostly is what's shown here. And the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, Lake Erie down here. And these colors inside of the water of those Great Lakes, those are phytoplankton as well. And phytoplankton have what we call blooms. So there's certain situations, environmental situations that cause phytoplankton to do really well. So the right combination of temperature and nutrients allows them to divide and grow really densely, so densely that these microorganisms that are just single cells, we can see them also from space. So this is the denseness of the greenery visible as these bloom. This is important from a photosynthesis standpoint. Also, toxic blooms are possible when these conditions are right and create some toxins that can make it hazardous to be in the water, to use that water for anything. Okay, so I talked about the importance of plants as the base of the food chain. This is just kind of a fanciful drawing, really emphasizing animal diversity. So you can see your mammals and your birds and your reptiles and fish and so on. Diversity of those, kind of the cute ones, the charismatic animals that we're more familiar with. But going towards the base of this drawing, the center of this drawing, is this ring of green. Just kind of a schematic, of course, it's not really very scientific, but shows you lots of green organisms in there. So this is the plants at the center, and all of these animal groups, for their food, they have to rely on plants. So whether you're an animal that eats plants or an animal that eats animals, eventually your food is coming from plants. So base of the food chain, and where do plants get their food from? Well, they can use photosynthesis to make food, but really at the center of this, from an energy standpoint, the center of this diagram is the sun. So the sun providing light energy, and then plants have this special ability of photosynthesis that they can turn light energy into food. All right, so we're going to talk about plants in this course. What does it mean to be a plant? If you want to tell somebody I'm studying plants, what is a plant and what is not a plant? We can shake that out in the first talk here. So we could look at organisms that might be considered as plants, or at least have something in common. These are organisms that, again, have that kind of green color. So in the upper left, we've got a moss. In the top middle, we've got a green single-celled algae. Over here, we've got a lichen. Down here, cyanobacterium. And over here, a fern. So they're all some shade of green, even the lichen a little bit on the green side. And so they have this feature in common where they can do photosynthesis. So they're doing photosynthesis and they look green as a result of that. Why? Why should green be so common? Well, it turns out that it's kind of a special deal to be able to do photosynthesis. And the biochemical process of photosynthesis, there's really, when it boils down, there's only one way to do it. So organisms that do photosynthesis share this ancestral way of doing photosynthesis that requires a special pigment molecule called chlorophyll. And chlorophyll looks green to the eye. So basically, if you are doing photosynthesis, you need to have chlorophyll. And if you have chlorophyll, that makes you look green. There would be a few exceptions. Maybe there are extra pigments. Some organisms are doing photosynthesis, but they have other pigments that make them look brown or sometimes purple or even closer to black. But somewhere in there is this green photosynthetic pigment. So really the greenness is tied directly to photosynthesis because you can't do photosynthesis without chlorophyll. Another aspect of photosynthesis, so in addition to getting that light energy and doing photosynthesis, another major output of photosynthesis is the ability to produce sugars. So plants are taking carbon dioxide from the air and turning it into sugars. They use that sugar to power their biochemical reactions. The sugars also become structural components of plants. So when we eat plants, we can eat some of the sugars they've put in, and we use those sugars for energy. Sugars also are the building blocks for other molecules. So after doing photosynthesis, the basic molecule can be turned into amino acids and fats and other things that we need to complete our metabolism and build our cells. So important first start here, and it comes back to carbon. So this is a big topic these days, right? There's carbon in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide, that has been released as a result of burning fossil fuels. So we're releasing carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere that was used by plants over really hundreds of millions of years. So they take carbon dioxide in. This was happening long before people were ever a blink in the eye of the earth. And we are digging those plants up, the bodies of old plants, and releasing their carbon dioxide again. So this graph, very familiar to you, I imagine by now, shows the global atmospheric carbon dioxide as a really crazy increase over the last 100 years. The time that we've been using fossil fuels since the Industrial Revolution. So people figured out how to turn these fossil fuels into energy. They power our cars, they power our electricity, all kinds of stuff. Very useful to us, but the consequence of using fossil fuels is that burning them releases carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So we're sort of putting CO2 back into the atmosphere that wasn't there at these levels for really a long, millions of years period of time. So this is something that we're not going to cover too much in this class, but it's certainly a topic that people talk about a lot. How do we fix this problem of global warming as a result of atmospheric carbon dioxide? So a lot of people are pushing this angle to plant trees, right? Can you plant a tree and replace the carbon dioxide that has come out as a result of burning fossil fuels? Well, it helps. We know that plants take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, turn it into their bodies. So the body of a tree really represents some amount of carbon dioxide that's no longer in the air. However, one tree is kind of small in the scheme of things. So this is an image of an open coal mine, and so large, this is a giant dump truck down here. So over here, some giant dump trucks. And I think I've even exaggerated this size of a tree. I wanted to make it big enough you could see it. But a real tree would be barely visible on this image. So this is an enormous undertaking to dig up the earth, dig up the bodies of hundreds of millions of years worth of trees and other plants put in the ground after they did photosynthesis. So we're releasing really way more carbon dioxide that then could be replaced by I think even planting the amount of trees that would cover the earth. I don't think that would replace the bodies of old trees that were stuck in the ground without decomposing, basically, and are now today's fossil fuels. So keep that in mind as you, maybe your generation takes on climate change. This is a major crisis, earth change that can't just be fixed by planting a few new trees. All right, I'm gonna take a little break and start a new video here. Stop share.